Hello there, and welcome to Cybersecurity Today. I'm Jim Wiggins, your host, and we're here to bring you the latest and key developments in computer security. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll be delving into an action-packed program filled with fascinating conversations and current news from the world of cybersecurity. Our unique talk show newscast format is designed to cater to a diverse audience, from beginners to experts in the field. If you're new to cybersecurity, we'll equip you with the essential knowledge and tools that you need to keep your computer system safe. And for experienced viewers, we'll be offering insights from some of the top experts in the industry, giving you a glimpse into the future of cybersecurity. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our informative and entertaining exploration of cybersecurity. We're thrilled to have you with us today. Our first segment is called Cyber Bites. Here, we're going to delve into some of the most recent news and events in the world of cybersecurity, covering everything from data breaches to news and emerging threats. If you want to stay up to date on the latest developments in this constantly evolving landscape, you won't want to miss this segment. We have a lot to cover, and we're excited to share these critical updates with you. Joining us in our second segment, we have Mr. Mark Thomas, President of Escoute Consulting and ISACA Hall of Fame inductee, to explore the topic of COBIT's role in modern cyber governance. With his unparalleled expertise in IT governance and cybersecurity, Mr. Thomas will delve into how COBIT 2019 equips organizations to navigate the evolving digital landscape and counteract cyber threats. Okay. Let's get into the Cyber Bites and talk about what's going on in the cybersecurity industry. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, has announced a comprehensive artificial intelligence strategy detailing its current applications and future plans for AI technology, including a DHS-wide policy directive, security guidance from CISA, and a risk analysis report by the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office. The strategy outlines AI's deployments in various areas, such as monitoring border activities and evaluating post-disaster building damages, and emphasizing the technology's dual potential to enhance mission capabilities and introduce new risk. It also mentions the development of an AI sandbox for experimenting with large language models in areas like refugee and asylum officer training, and document analysis for Homeland Security investigations. The roadmap highlights DHS's efforts to expand its AI expertise, including the recruitment of 50 new AI specialists and the formation of an AI task force against the backdrop of broader initiatives to govern and utilize AI technologies effectively. In other news, the Russian hacking group APT28, also known as Fancy Bear, has launched a phishing campaign using a legitimate Microsoft Windows feature to distribute malware, according to an IBM X-Force report. Active from November to February of this year, the campaign targets individuals across Europe, the Southern Caucasus, Central Asia, and the Americas by masquerading as government and nonprofit organization emails containing malicious PDFs. These PDFs exploit the Windows Search MS function URI protocol handler to direct victims to malware on attacker-controlled servers disguised as PDF files for download. The malware, hosted on compromised Ubiquiti routers, is capable of exfiltrating data and running arbitrary commands. Victims in countries include Argentina, Ukraine, Georgia, and the US are all at risk of installing malware like MacePy, OceanMap, and also SteelHook. In other news, despite long-standing awareness of the healthcare industry's vulnerability to cyber attacks, federal officials and industry leaders have struggled to implement measures to prevent incidents like the devastating ransomware attack on United Health Group's Change Healthcare. This failure is attributed to resistance from private sector lobbyists and slow legislative and regulatory actions, resulting in a lack of mandatory security standards. The recent attack, which severely impacted patient care and financial transactions within the healthcare system, underscores the necessity for more stringent security requirements and support for smaller providers. Critics, including Senator Ron Wyden and Deputy National Security Advisor Ann Neuberger, advocate for immediate action and mandatory cybersecurity rules to prevent future breaches, highlighting the complex challenge of securing a sprawling, interconnected healthcare infrastructure against sophisticated cyber attacks. Those are some of the current events happening today in the cybersecurity industry. After a quick intermission, we'll return with Mr. Mark Thomas to discuss securing the digital frontier, COBIT's role in modern cyber governance. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a minute.
VA's round-the-clock hotline can put veterans who are homeless in touch with the resources and support they earned through their military service. Call 877-424-3838.
Welcome back to Cybersecurity Today. Now we have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Mark Thomas, President of Escoute Consulting and a distinguished member of the ISACA Hall of Fame. With his extensive experience in IT governance, risk management, and cybersecurity, Mr. Thomas has been at the forefront of advising organizations on leveraging COBIT 2019 to enhance their cybersecurity frameworks and governance strategies. Today, he'll enlighten us on securing the digital frontier, COBIT's role in the modern cyber governance, highlighting how organizations can employ COBIT 2019 to safeguard against digital threats and ensure robust governance. Mark, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're really excited to have you here. I was wondering if maybe we could have you provide a quick overview of what COBIT is and how it's used by organizations for IT as well as cyber governance. Can we start there?
Sure. Yep, you got it. So interesting history on COBIT, and hopefully I'll get a chance to tell you about a history of this, but this is a framework. And one of the things about a framework that's interesting is a framework is not law, it's not legislation, it's not a standard. It's a framework that allows you to take the parts and pieces of this that are most applicable to you. And I think a lot of organizations misunderstand that, because the COBIT police are not going to show up and say, you're not following COBIT. Well, if you think about what this is, and it has a long history, starting off with kind of audit and cybersecurity or security roots specifically, this has really grown into a governance and management of enterprise information and technology framework. What that means is there's this distinction between governance and management and organization. And what COBIT does, it looks at the entire enterprise and makes that distinction between governance and management and says, here are the components, here are the processes you need to have in place to have an overarching governance system and management system. Now, so earlier versions of COBIT, it was really difficult for people to understand where to start in this. And we've done a lot of really good things to make COBIT really useful for everybody in the organization. But I want to be very clear on what COBIT is not, right? COBIT is not a full description of the whole enterprise. It's not organizing business processes. It's not a technical framework. And it's really not prescribing any specific IT-related decisions. So having said all that, it's a great framework for organizations to use to be able to organize their processes, take a look at their services, but more importantly, be able to link other frameworks, other standards, other bodies of knowledge into this ecosystem of frameworks that an organization might use. So it's finally escaped that whole idea that it's a cybersecurity or security framework and an audit framework. It can be used by anybody in the organization.
Understood. Can we talk a little bit about how COBIT 2019 has been designed to address the challenges of modern technology trends as well as cyber? Can you speak to that for a minute?
You bet. COBIT was not designed to address a specific technology. It was designed to address those practices and activities and assurance over all of information and technology. You know that as soon as somebody pens down a specific technology and says, we have a framework for it, and either an update to that technology or a new technology is going to show up. The idea here is that we have a basis of how an organization should govern and manage its information and technology processes, its services, its people, its policies, to be able to appropriate the right skills and the competencies and the things we need to do to be able to support emerging technologies. Nowhere in COBIT you see AI. Nowhere in COBIT you see Bitcoin, but all of the foundational elements can address what the challenges are and the assurance efforts of each one of those emerging technologies that we've got.
Understood. Thank you. Hey, I'm curious, can we talk a moment about I know that COBIT is broken down into like 40 governance and management objectives. How do these contribute to aligning IT processes with business goals? Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, interesting. So when we talk about business goals, I believe one of the best kept secrets within COBIT, and I've seen other frameworks pick this up as of late, it's called the goals cascade, right? So what happens is we have this goals cascade that really takes what we call stakeholder drivers and needs, and there are tables in COBIT that give you guidance on how you can do this, and you can adjust and modify this as that fits your needs. But what it does is you take these stakeholder drivers and needs and you map those into, say, your enterprise goals. 13 generic enterprise goals in the COBIT framework. Those are mapped down to alignment goals. And what those then do is map down to what we call the governance and management objectives. Most of us think about those governance and management objectives as processes. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to tell you a little bit more about what those processes are, but there are 40 of those key objectives from governance and from management that every organization needs to address. We also have one other piece, I think, that is really, really powerful in COBIT, and those are called the design factors. And so in addition to things like the goals cascade, we have several other factors that we can use to help you determine which of those objectives or processes are most important and most valuable for the organization.
Understood. Understood. Thanks. For a lot of organizations, whether we like it or not, compliance, regulatory, and legal requirements are things they have to factor in. How does COBIT play in that particular space?
Yeah, so the very foundations of COBIT focuses on this whole idea of performance and conformance. If you are conformant to every single rule, law, regulatory requirement that you need to be, you will no longer be operating as a business. I've seen organizations literally go out of business because they're so overly conformant. One of the things that COBIT really does is takes a look, and we have one of the governance and management objectives in this framework that does that. That says, at what point do you say we're willing to accept the risk of nonconformance? Again, there's risk factors involved here. One of the things COBIT really does is says, hey, we understand that you can't be conformant to everything, but here are the basic objectives that you need to accomplish. Now, you may be accomplishing each of those objectives at varying levels of capability and maturity, but that gives you an opportunity to survive as a business, to perform while still being conformant. And we have a lot of the substrate of that would be on the risk management side.
Understood. Understood. Can we talk for a moment about how COBIT helps with designing a governance system that fits within organizations' unique circumstances and contexts?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite parts of COBIT. Well, they're all my favorite parts. Well, one of the things we learned in earlier versions of COBIT, especially when we launched COBIT 5, we wanted COBIT to be perfect. And I will say it, sometimes perfect can ruin good. COBIT 5 was a gorgeous version of the framework, but what happened is we didn't give any guidance on how to pick the parts of COBIT that are most applicable and provide the most value for the organization. That's when we introduced what are called the design factors. These design factors are attributes. And there's a tool. You can go out to the ISACA site and go to the design factor section and actually get an Excel spreadsheet that helps you walk through these. Design factors really walk you through those elements that are important to your organization. Those are things like your enterprise strategy, your enterprise goals, the goals cascade we talked about, your risk profile, I&T related issues, threat landscape, compliance requirements, you name it. There are several of these design factors. And if you go through the process of analyzing where you are with those design factors, COBIT says, here are those governance and management objectives that are most applicable to you. If you focus on the other ones, it's not going to hurt you, but you may be putting time, effort, money into something that's not creating value for the enterprise. Those are called the design factors, and that's in what's called the design guide for COBIT 2019.
Understood. Can we talk for a moment about the role of leadership in supporting COBIT and governance? How important is it? I know for a lot of frameworks, it tends to be very, very relevant. Is it safe to say that that's similar with the COBIT framework?
It is. One of the things we have are called governance components. In previous versions of COBIT, we called these governance enablers. And so in that, we've got a lot of these things. We've got processes, organizational structures, and so on. But there's two specific components that I think really help leadership and management understand what their role is in governance of enterprise IT. One of those is called organizational structures. COBIT actually provides a sample or a suggested RACI chart. It takes practices and says, hey, based on roles in an organization, which of these practices should be accountable, responsible, consultant, and informed? I think another just as important piece of that is another one of these components, and it's called culture, ethics, and behavior. As you know, you can't change culture in an organization on a weekend, but the cultural aspects of an organization are largely driven by the leadership of that organization. If the leadership is willing to take risk, the culture of the organization may be more willing to take risk, and so on. So there's two pieces in there. So the way we broke this down in the COBIT framework, each of those 40 governance and management objectives, we talk about organizational structures and we talk about the cultural elements. Generally, that goes back to the leadership side, and I think it's very, very powerful. And again, you can modify this to fit your needs, but it's a great starting point for every organization.
Understood. Let's now talk a little bit about integration with other standards. How does COBIT work within the context of like the NIST CSF or other complementary frameworks that organizations might have employed or adopted in some context?
Absolutely. So, as I always have a frustration every time a framework is launched, we put a stake in the ground, say, here's the framework as of this date. Well, when COBIT 2019 was launched, a lot of the frameworks that we used to reference, right, they've been updated since then. Let's take ITIL, for example, right? So when we launched COBIT 2019, ITIL is on version 3. It's on version 4 now. And most of these take place. But I will tell you this is we did not want COBIT to be created in a vacuum that says, we're the smartest framework in the world, so we don't think any of you matter. What COBIT does is links out to multiple other frameworks out there. And I often talk about what I call my altitudes of frameworks. So we have enterprise governance, and under enterprise governance, we may be looking at things like the balanced scorecard for performance. We may be looking at things like COSO for conformance. But we may have an IT organization that has a bunch of frameworks, and a lot of people who are probably listening to this or watching to this are suffering from what I call framework overload. Right? But what happens is this sounds really redundant. But COBIT, in an organization that I was a CIO of, as well as many others, COBIT became our framework to manage frameworks. It's that middleware. It helps us look at the enterprise governance requirements, at all the frameworks, and says, here are the parts and the pieces of those frameworks that are applicable to you. NIST, ISO standards, the CSC, for example. Even though COBIT 2019 put a stake in the ground at the date that it was launched, each of those frameworks or standards or references have been updated, but the mapping to the previous versions really are not that difficult. So what COBIT says is, hey, we're looking at governance. We're looking cybersecurity, information security. We're looking privacy. We're looking at governance. It links back to each one of those frameworks to help avoid that whole idea of framework overload and framework exhaustion.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So does COBIT actually get into helping organizations with actual cyber-related activity? So for example, if an organization is concerned about the increase in cyber attacks, how would COBIT work within that paradigm to help them deal with those threats more effectively? Can you speak to that?
Yep, and that makes a lot of sense. So again, like I was mentioning earlier, is originally there was a lot of focus just on information security and compliance and so on. But like we said, COBIT has moved into the governance space. There's a couple of areas where COBIT truly focuses on those types of things like cyber and so on. There's actually two. There's actually two governance or management objectives that are based on security. We have one that's called APO 13. It's called managed security. So it's the whole idea of having your ISMS, right, security management system, having the policies in place and so on. We have another one called managed security services, things like identity and access management, endpoint security, and so on. But what's interesting is COBIT has actually taken those and it's linked those to other objectives or other processes that are just as important, right? Things like managed risk, managed vendors, managed data, and so on. So it's really taken an integrated approach, but what it does is it provides the basis for, say, security, privacy, professionals to be able to use these as core control objectives or practices and say, where do I need to go next? COBIT says, hey, you want more information here? Go to NIST and it references that document. Go to ISO, it references that document. So even though it's not exclusively focused on security, it's looking at security under this umbrella of enterprise IT governance for an organization.
Understood. I'm curious as to maybe how you foresee COBIT evolving to meet future challenges in cybersecurity and also digital governance. Thoughts?
Yeah. Yep. So interesting. So there's a lot is taking place. We haven't updated COBIT in a couple of years, of course, and I certainly hope that we've got some updates coming up. But I think in today's high velocity environment, right, I think one of the things that we'll really have to look at is more the dynamic nature of updating the COBIT practices and updating the COBIT activities. I personally don't make those decisions, but I think what's happening, what I'm seeing now is this evolution into digital trust. What's interesting is you think about 3 years ago, when you looked at digital trust, there was the World Economic Forum talked about it. And since then, ISACA has created a digital trust ecosystem framework. But in the last 2 years, I've seen the increase in frameworks around digital trust. My point here is I think we're going to see more of a convergence between, a lot of the frameworks, the control frameworks like, say, COBIT, or the governance frameworks as well, and looking at outcomes of good privacy and good security. I believe an outcome of privacy and security would be, do your customers, do your consumers actually trust you? What I would like to see is more of a convergence between COBIT and the whole idea of digital trust. I think that's the next evolution because, of course, trust being an outcome of all these great practices, and you link that back to our 3 lines model, formerly known as a 3 lines of defense model, so that now our first, second, and third lines can know what do we need to look at in order to make sure that we are providing good cybersecurity, privacy, and we are compliant.
Understood. We're running low on time, Mark, but
it's okay. I probably talked too much.
No, you're doing great. Thank you. I appreciate it. So this next question kind of dovetails to your prior answer. What ways can organizations prepare for future developments in IT governance and cybersecurity frameworks like COBIT? Any thoughts on that? You talked about digital trust, but I didn't know if that was, getting ready for that is the answer.
Hey, absolutely. And I think it makes a lot of sense because what I want to be careful about is don't say you're implementing COBIT, right? And so I actually stood in front of my board of directors and they gave me some guidance that I thought was time honored. They said, look, we're not interested in your COBITs, your ITILs, your TOGAFs, your ISOs, your COSIT. We don't care about those. What we care about is that we have a framework in place that will help us balance conformance and performance. So kind of going on to that, I would say that I have a couple of top suggestions I'd like to make for organizations or individuals going in this. Number one, understand why you're adopting governance. Are you doing this because you have to, or are you doing this because you want to or need to? I would suggest take a look at IT governance before your company or your organization makes it on the front page of the newspaper. Next thing is assemble the right stakeholders and get their support. There are so many stakeholders involved here from interested parties, internal, external, and get support from those folks, and you may need to give them some IT governance or even some COBIT training or a high-level view of what this is. Educate them on what the governance principles are, get full agreement, go through and do a design factor analysis. We talked about design factors a little earlier. Those are those things that we look at in an organization to say, what parts of COBIT are most applicable? You're not implementing COBIT. You're adopting the parts of COBIT that are most applicable and valuable to your organization. And I will say from a culture perspective, be really careful because you can't change culture overnight. So one of the things to do is make sure that we're communicating, look at organizational change strategies to help this happen, and have a continual improvement and make sure you're collecting those performance indicators. You're looking at how you're going to measure this, because an investment in a governance system and a governance program, you're not going to get results on Monday, right? Benefits and realization could take place weeks, months, quarters, or years later.
Understood. Final question for you, Mark. 20
Sure.
seconds. For viewers looking to delve deeper into COBIT and its application in cybersecurity, where would they go? How would they learn more about it?
So I would go out. So there's a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of things like that out there. I would go out to the ISACA site. There are 4 key publications that I would look at. Number 1, I would look at what's called the Introduction to Methodology. It's a free document, whether you are a ISACA member or not. Other ones may be documents you have to pay for, but another one that's one of my favorites, it's called the Governance and Management Objectives. It's my Bible, if you will. It talks about those 40 governance and management objectives, and there's something in that document for everyone. Take a look at what's called the Design and Implementation Guide. And then finally, we have the Implementation Guide. So ISACA has a lot of really good information in there. Out on YouTube, I've got several YouTube videos explaining the contents and how to use a lot of the documents out there. But the core place to go look is on the ISACA site, and you'll see a lot of stuff out there as well.
So that's great. Hey, Mark, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us and providing such valuable insight to our viewers. We deeply appreciate it, your time you shared with us.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to join you. I appreciate you having me.
That wraps up today's episode. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Mr. Mark Thomas for his invaluable insights into COBIT, digital trust, governance, and risk management. We hope today's dialogue has been enlightening and stimulating, providing fresh perspective on cybersecurity approaches. To learn more about cybersecurity today and keep up to date on future episodes, please visit our website at www.cybersecuritytoday.org. Additionally, you can scan the QR code displayed at the bottom of your screen for quick and easy access to our show's website. Finally, we welcome your questions or comments via email at contact@cybersecuritytoday.org. Feel free to reach out to us. We look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Thanks a lot for joining us. Stay safe and stay informed.